Okay, good afternoon. I am Cassandra Barrientos,
My name is Alejandra Monsiváis.
And I am Maida Cortez.
and today we're going to presenting the case study of Susie.
Okay, so the name of the student is Susie Smith. She is 10 years old and 6 months, and she is currently placed in third grade, third month. A little background information on her is family history. She's a student who is normally developed in a warm, caring home environment. Susie's parents report that she is a well adjusted child and that she does not show any social emotional disturbances. Susie appears to have a good relationship with both parents and her two older brothers.
Okay, so now we're going to be speaking about the educational history of Susie. So Susie was referred for testing by her parents for the possible consideration of special education services. Her parents believe that her difficulties began to surface when she was last year when she was in second grade. Um, Susie's parents hired a tutor to help her after school with her homework. She has been receiving targeted intervention for reading, but she has not made any progress. Susie's RTI committee tried to do alternative interventions. However, her progress continues to be slow. Uh, we also want to point out that she repeated kinder and she received low grades while in first grade and second grade. And now she's currently enrolled in third grade. She also attended a camp in summer that would do instructional interventions for reading, and she as well did not respond to that instructional intervention.
So moving on to indirect assessment data, we're going to hit on teacher report. So Susie has a normal vision and hearing with no apparent physical problems. Susie seems to stay on task in class and she attempts all assignment work. When assignments were due, more than half of Susie's assignments were turned in incomplete. It is noticeable Susie may be having some emerging problems. Anxiety and difficulties with concentration are also noticeable. These issues may be related to her current performance in school. For her age, it's noticeable Susie did not demonstrate any inappropriate behavior, and also she seemed to have friends in the classroom. The implementation of peer tutors for Susie is also written down for some of the language arts and reading assignments. By implementing these measures, Susie improved in finishing her work. Susie has difficulty with phonics and reading words she should already know by her grade level. It was notified that Susie attended a special summer program in an attempt to improve her reading skills. As mentioned, she has not responded to instructional interventions that focus on reading.
Now, moving on to work sample analysis, we can observe that Susie had a difficult time finishing her assignments. Therefore, most of her assignments were turned in as incomplete. The work sample analysis indicated that Susie has a relative strength in the ability to compute simple math operations and to understand math concepts as well as math reasoning. Her samples for spelling, writing, and reading comprehensions were in the failure range. Work samples indicated weaknesses in her ability to associate written letters with sounds, which is consistent with her performance on standardized achievement measures.
Okay, so now we're moving on to student observations. 3 classroom observations were conducted, and all 3 Susie was cooperative and remained quiet during all observations. She attended to begin her work as she was directed to do so, but unfortunately, when it came to language arts, she had difficulties completing the work. She was also off task during most of the language arts as when she was told to do language arts assignments. However, when she was doing her math, she wasn't. She seemed to be on task, and it seemed to be a subject she was interested in. Okay, so now moving on to test behaviors. Susie is considered to have a range of abilities consisting with the low end of average and bordering in the below average range. Susan is at borderline of intellectual disabilities. She is considered a slow learner.
So next is the methods of assessment. These were administered to Susie. Work sample analysis, starting from the bottom. We have reviewing students' work product by focusing on the quality of their output. Then we have teacher report form, which is to measure the assessed problem behavior and can identify a syndrome. It also assesses academic performance and adaptive functioning. Then we have test of auditory perception skills, which is intended to be used as part of a battery. The taps measure what a child does with what he or she hears. So this helps to diagnose auditory processing difficulties and perceptions of auditory modality, language problems, and or learning disabilities. Then we have the Woodcock-Johnson test, and lastly the Welcher's intelligence scale. So it takes the Welcher's intelligence scale takes about 45 to 60 minutes to admin and generate a full scale IQ, which represents a child's general intellectual ability, both verbal and nonverbal.
Okay, so the test results have been provided in a written document, and now we will move on to the test interpretation report.
For Woodcock-Johnson IB test of achievement, Susie overall she performed as expected for her age on items requiring math calculation and math reasoning. Susie's general academic knowledge was in the range expected for her age when she completed tasks in the areas of science, social studies, and humanities. Susie also demonstrated age-appropriate skills in the ability to comprehend orally and in handwriting ability.
So now for the interpretations of academic assessments. Susie's difficulties in academics were demonstrated through formal assessment in the areas of written language, including reading, spelling, and phonemic and graphemic knowledge. These weaknesses resulted in the inability to decode new word sounds, new words, spell sounds, and comprehend content that is being read. Susie demonstrates weakness in decoding single consonants, consonants, uh, consonant blend, vowels, and multi-syllabic words. Okay, so now on items requiring oral language responses, Susie was somewhat shy and tended to limit her response to one-word answers. So this may affect some of her scores on this testing assessment. So these scores are may underestimate her true ability. So these scores are not really reliable.
Okay, so now moving on to behavioral assessments. Items indicate that Susie may be having some emerging problems with anxiety. Items were also endorsed that are consistent with difficulties with concentration as well with attention. This may be related to her current performance in school. None of Susie's scores was within a clinical range for behavioral problems. Now, the test of auditory perceptual skills, she seems to have relative weaknesses with subsets that measure memory for isolated words and numbers. She appears to have slightly higher ability to remember meaningful auditory stimuli, such as sentences or directions. However, she had difficulty on similar items of the Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement, indicating inconsistent skill mastery or inconsistent abilities.
Now moving on to teacher report behavior checklist. As mentioned, Susie is unable to complete most of her work as it is expected of students of her age. Now, math work samples. Susie has a relatively strength and ability to compute simple math operations, and she's able to understand math conceptions as well as math reasoning.
Susie took several assessments performed by the examiner Jesus Compton. Susie has a language processing disability where she can read words at an average pace, but cannot process the words and relate it to her own definition. She seems to struggle more with the language arts than math. In the for example, in the Woodcock Johnson says her standard score for math calculation skills was 96 and problem solving 92 compared to her language arts standard score. Spelling was 52, writing sample 79, oral reading 65. She cannot match vocabulary appropriately for a sentence. Susie seems to have trouble comprehending certain vocabulary and seems to need more opportunities to practice and remember key vocabulary. For example, she cannot spell, sound, or decode new words, meaning she lacks reading, spelling, phonemes, and graphing knowledge. Even in math, with concepts that are vocabulary, her scores are low and understanding the vocabulary necessary. She understands the process involved in completing simple math operations, but word problems give her a hard time. So, to my view, Susie is a slow learner who demonstrates difficulty with phonemes and graphemes. This results in the inability to decode and spell new words. Her learning needs include a need to better understand vocabulary and improve comprehension of readings. Issuing an individualized education plan or IEP and possibly include a language therapist and target Susie's language processing needs. Um, that's what I would include. I would work with the language therapist directly on the vocabulary in a reading issue. Since her parents are participants and worry about her education, I would also suggest they work with Susie at home. Her work samples indicate weakness in spelling, writing, and in reading, as said before. For Susie, I can try to test on a theme by theme basis. For example, if we're studying division, it would be best not to introduce a word problem that uses the word product until we are completely sure that she knows and has mastered the vocabulary concept of that word. To modify Susie's curriculum and instruction, I would intensively work on vocabulary. She tends to leave her work incomplete. To reduce incomplete work, we can make modifications. For example, for reading, we can modify the test, the question, and answers. Only give two choices instead of
So in my report, Susie, she's at borderline for an intellectual disability. However, I think she's just a slow learner because the assignments were incomplete, but she was able to do part of the assignments. According to all of the tests and all of the assessments that were administered to Susie, we can see that she is good at math, but she's struggling a little bit more with her spelling skills, decoding skills. As we can see from the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, she's really strong with block design, with similarities, with visual puzzles, but she's weak with processing speed or working memory, which can be the reason why her speech activities related with speech and decoding and reading and comprehension might be affected. So I think we can provide Susie with more time to do her activities. We can continue with peer tutoring, which she can continue working with her tutor. And I think it will be just a matter of being consistent and don't give up or think that she is not capable of doing the assignments, because I think she is. With time, she can be able to turn her assignments as completed instead of as incomplete. And eventually she'll be in a normal pace as with her students in her grade.
In my individual report, I am unable to provide a diagnosis of what Susie has. However, with the test results provided, I am able to conclude that Susie is a slow learner. She has shown difficulties in language arts. For example, she has shown difficulties in encoding in areas of written language, reading, spelling, phonemic, inability to decode new words, spelling sounds, and comprehend what she is reading. decode single consonants, diagrams, consonant blends, vowels, and multi-syllable words. She also scored very low on most of the areas in the auditory perceptual skills assessment. She also has problems with isolation words and numbers. That makes me conclude that she has problems in language arts. However, her high scores in places such as block design, which is visual. We have high scores in visual puzzles, in comprehension, information, and similarities. Makes me conclude that she has a strong area in math that does not include word problems. Um, due to my inability to diagnose Susie, I am unable to provide any interventions that will aid her to catch up with her classmates. However, I believe she is a student we shouldn't give up on. She is a student that we should continue to assess and find out what her main issue is, or if she, if possible, has any intellectual disabilities. And that would conclude my individual report.
So, reflecting on this case study, we consider that it is really important to that this case, Susie's case, is really important because we as teachers, we shouldn't be jumping into conclusions when a student is not doing well in only one area or many areas. We have to take into consideration all of the factors because the student might be weak in some areas, but he or she can be really good at some other areas. So it's really important when we are assessing to take into considerations all of the subjects and skills.
Yes, we have to take into consideration if we, as educators, are providing each other with enough time to teach the subjects properly, or giving each enough time for the students to learn and enough time to reteach. That's why planning is very key. And like my partner mentioned, to not jump into conclusions just because there's a process, and if that process didn't work out once does not mean that it won't work again. We have to be consistent and just assess, 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 and assess.
Also, assessment inspire us to take these hard questions into consideration. Are we teaching what we think we are teaching? Are students learning what they're supposed to learn? Is there another way to teach the subject in a better way? And that's all I have.
And then the next question we want to reflect on is,
How does this learning experience in this case changes our view towards assessment of children with special needs? And well, I think that Susie had to go through a series of tests, not only one test, not only her work samples, not only the teacher's observations, but she had to go through all these kinds of tests so the teacher could be like really sure of what she had. And in the world of education, quantity it's not always quality. It doesn't mean that, oh yeah, I did all these kinds of tests to the students, so like I'm good and the student is good. No, but in this case, we required to do multiple measures to really ensure that we gain an accurate picture of the students' performance when compared to their peers.
For me, when it said the results are not being complete, as in she is not performing her best, I think she has another other areas of where she can perform her best, not just reading and writing. That's what I learned about this case study.
yes, what I learned about this case study was to never give up. As mentioned, I was unable to provide a diagnosis to Susie, but I am pretty sure that if I continue with her case study, I am able to come up what her issue is. But I think that's what I learned from this case, to never give up and be consistent. Just because I see that she's struggling in math does not mean that she will always struggle in math. Maybe there's something as educators, or since her parents are involved, that they can do to assess her. But to this point, I am unable to provide any interventions. But just never give up. If I am given the opportunity to get more information, maybe come up with an intervention for her.
Yes, and adding on to that, not just one single test or evaluation can capture a child's full spectrum of strengths and weaknesses and challenges. Assessments give us, as future educators and educators, guidance as to how to provide the best services to support for children. And as we said previously, we have to take all the factors into consideration. Maybe it's the teacher who's not teaching effectively because maybe Susie is really good at math and that's her strength. And the coding and spelling and comprehension is not her strongest point, but we assume that we're teaching it effectively, but maybe we're not. So we have to be really aware of our teaching skills as well.
Yes, this was a very interesting case, and it was very useful because as future educators, we never know what we're going to get, and we might get a student that has some similar qualities to what Susie is going through, and it was very nice to dip our toes in to what could lie ahead for us. And thank you, and that'll be it. Bye.